Hi, so as I promised, I'm going to now give you a bit about the origins of fuck. I'm going to do this in two parts. In the idea here, and this is something I want to emphasize, is that when we give an origin story like this, an etymology of a word, it's a hypothesis. So there is a scientific process to this. There are methods for identifying the origins of words. But with any scientific process like this, it is a hypothesis, which means that there's the possibility that we're wrong, that we will find more evidence later that will suggest that we need to revise our hypotheses. And that's okay. That's the way that these activities work. But the point is that we need to use good methodology in the first place. We can't just make up a story. We've got to trace it back to its origins. Now, anytime that we are looking at the etymology of an English word, the best place to begin is the Oxford English Dictionary. So the Oxford English Dictionary is really a wonderful resource for us to use. It started in, I believe, about the 1870s is when they really started working on it for in earnest. And it was an incredibly ambitious project. The idea was to present all of the words of English, give their definitions as they would for, in any dictionary. But they were more ambitious than that. They didn't want to just give the definitions, the meanings of these things. They wanted to try to trace it back and give some context to find the earliest uses of the words. Now, obviously, it's based on written language, so it's not the very earliest uses of the words, which does end up being a problem when we're looking at taboo words, because taboo words are less likely to be written than other words are. But given that, it still is pretty impressive that we can find the origins of words this way by tracing back the first uses of it in English. Now, to do this, what they had to do is they had to get all of these volunteer readers. So they would assign readers books, and then the readers would pull representative passages in order to act as quotations for the words and to give them some context. And so they had many volunteers helping them with this project, and it still took them several decades to get even the first of the volumes out, and there were more than 20 volumes ultimately. Today they're no longer publishing it as a hard copy version. They're only publishing it as an e-resource now on the internet, and you need to have a subscription, which all of you have, by the way, because you are students of the University of Utah. You have direct access to the Oxford English Dictionary through the Marriott website. All right, now, for the other part of what the Oxford English Dictionary does, the third one, is that they also give etymologies, and that's what we're going to be interested in right now. And the reason it's a good place to begin is because they give a very conservative etymology. They don't just simply accept anything out there. They're only going to give an etymology if they feel pretty confident about it. They will only trace a word back as far as they feel comfortable doing. So what they're saying here, and we need to kind of explain what's going on. So what they say, probably cognate with Dutch Volken. Now, cognate, what this means is that it's a word in another language that is typically a related language. And there's a word that is presumably related to an English word. So Dutch, closely related language to English. We've got this verb volken, and they trace the meaning of it. So in the 15th century, it meant something like to mock, to strike in the 16th century, then you get up to the 17th century, to fool or to gull, or to beget children, now starting to look a little more close to English fuck, and then to have sexual intercourse in 1657, to grow or to cultivate, that seems to go along with some of these others, like to beget children. So these are words in related languages that seem to be related both by form and by meaning. And what that suggests then is that there was probably an ancestor word from an ancestor language that predated both English and Dutch then, where these words descended from that. So "foken" in Dutch and "fuck" in English, and would have earlier English would have been "fuken." So in earlier English, "fuken," "foken" in Dutch probably came from some ancestor word in a language which we call Proto-Germanic that probably predated English and Dutch. Now they're not forcing that, they're just saying that is probably cognate with that, and you can make your own inference from that. Then they also say that there's this Norwegian regional word "fuka," which means to copulate. That looks pretty good. Similar form then and similar meaning. Swedish "folka," to copulate. And then there's also this regional Swedish "folk," meaning penis. But they're not willing to go any further than that. So further etymology uncertain. So, like I said, they are conservative. They're only going to go so far. Now, they then do go and state a suggestion. And notice that they preface this with "perhaps." And then this symbol here, this symbol here means descended from. So perhaps descended from an Indo-European root meaning to strike. Also shown by classical Latin pugnus, fist. Similar word was pugnacious, right? So somebody who likes to use their fists. And then they give some evidence to support why that might make sense. So fist makes sense, that's something that strikes. And then you've got Old Icelandic "fjuka," which means to be driven on, tossed by the wind. Middle High German "fochen," to hiss or to blow. And it might have been comparable to Middle High German "fiken," to rub, early modern German "fiken," to rub, itch, scratch. And then German "fiken," to have sexual intercourse with, and the first representative of that we can find is in the 16th century. So that sounds reasonable, right? And they're saying, that's all they're saying, is that's a possibility. Now, of course, there's some things you need to explain then. One would be, why a P in Latin? Why E instead of an U in German, right? So these are questions, and we'll try to address them in the next presentation. Then they go and they suggest that if you're interested, that you can look at this article by Lass, 4 Letters in Search of an Etymology, where he presents an argument for a particular Indo-European etymology. That's the hypothesis that I'm going to be presenting in the next presentation. Now, the Oxford English Dictionary continues, gives some other possibilities here. I won't go into this part here. If you're interested, you can always check it out on the Oxford English Dictionary yourself. What I'm interested in, though, is what they say here. Many alternative theories have been suggested as to the origin of this word. Explanations as an acronym are often suggested, but are obviously much later rationalizations, which is exactly what I was saying. So in other words, with much more formal language, they're saying that those folk etymologies are nonsense. Now, I said that the other thing that the Oxford English Dictionary is great for is finding the early context of it. Of the words. And so they do that, and they give some early quotations. Here's the earliest one that they give. This is from a poem, which is typically called Fenflus, from a line from the poem. And it's this part right here that they're interested in. And we'll go over that a little bit more detail in a second. What the heck is going on here with this nonsense stuff. And then they've got some other examples from 1568. Bishops may fuck their fill and not be married. In other words, bishops may fuck as much as they want without being married. 1597, he fucks and serves both Ellen Sultan's wife, Stanley, and her daughter. Then 1680, much wine and passed with grave discourse of who fucks who and who does worse. So you see, pretty early on, you see some pretty clear examples of that. So at least back to 1500, we've got uses of fuck. So here's the poem. This is the first one. And the poem, they list 1500 for some reason, but it seems that the poem itself probably dates from about 1475. I won't try to read it because my English from this period, I really don't know how to pronounce it very well. But let me just highlight this portion right here. So it's that part right here that we're interested in, where these look like just random letters, and you'd be reasonable for thinking that, but it's actually a code, and it's a very simple code. It's just a letter-by-letter replacement here. So it's really pretty straightforward what they're doing, and we'll see in a second exactly what it is. Let me get rid of that highlighting and go to the next slide. And what we see then is here's the unencoded or the encoded version, and here is the decoded version. So it's just a replacement, basically just replace a G with an F, an X with a U. Well, obviously what's going on there is that you have the earlier letter replaces this one. So G becomes F, X becomes U, D becomes C, so on. And you get this Foucant Uis of Heli, which translates into contemporary English as they fuck the wives of Eli. And then there was another one, friars with knives go about and swive men's wives, which they also put in the code. Swive was a word that was pretty much synonymous with fuck. They were both probably moderately taboo at the time, and they meant informatively the same thing. So you see them both, and I shouldn't even say moderately, they were clearly taboo enough to go about putting this in a code when they wrote the poem. All right, now, here's another one. This is a slightly different use of fuck, where this is an intransitive use, and this one dates back to 1513. I'll try to read this. I probably won't get the pronunciations quite right, but I'll read the original. He klappet fast die kist die chukket, as with gleiches ye were algan, yet be as fair as ye were how fucket, ye break my heart me bonny one. He clapped fast, he kissed and chucked, as if he were overcome with foolishness, yet by his behavior he would rather have fucked. You break my heart, my bonny one. All right, so you can see then how convenient this is to have these early representations of it. You can go to the Oxford English Dictionary's entry for fuck. You can see all of this for yourself and more. The entry is actually quite large, and there's a lot of interesting stuff in it that you can see for yourself. It does take a little bit of work at first to start understanding how it's all laid out and what some of the symbols mean and stuff like that. And there are some tutorials on the site as well. So if you go to the Oxford English Dictionary site and you go to the help section, you can find information about how to understand some of the abbreviations and what they mean by things. It can be especially helpful when you're looking at the etymology, which can be kind of complicated to understand. I know from past experience that students in this class have had some troubles understanding exactly what the etymology says. Okay, so in the next presentation, I'm going to be going over lasses etymology in some detail to understand how we get to it.